This is the Topping LA90 Discrete, a speaker amplifier from the Topping company. Now, this is a speaker amplifier only. You will need some sort of processor to process the audio signal, send it onto the amplifier so it can be amplified and then sent onto your speakers. This is the Topping EX5. It's a headphone amplifier, but it also has processing built in, and it has XLR connections on the back, which allows it to connect to the LA90. You can also use balanced TRS connections to connect to the LA90, but your processor will need one of those, XLR or TRS balanced connections. Now, I can recommend the Topping D90 SE as a really nice processor to pair with this particular amplifier. I tried it maybe about a year ago. I reviewed it and I really liked it. It's a nice, clean sounding processor, so I recommend that. But as you can see up front, the LA90 Discrete is actually fairly minimal, which I don't have a problem with. Right here is a multifunction button that you push it and it turns the amplifier on, but you can also press it and go through the input selections like that. And if you push and hold, it turns it off. And in the center, you've got a nice big volume knob right here, and it's got a nice little weight to it. It feels nice and premium with the weight that it has to it, and it's got just a little bit of bounce off of the stops, so it feels nice and premium. But this amplifier does not come with a remote. So if you just want to sit on your couch and change the volume, I recommend a processor that has a preamp built in with a remote with volume control. Like the D90 SE, it has all of those things. You can just plug it in and then you can use the D90 as your volume control for this amplifier. All right, moving on to the rear of the LA90 Discrete. As you can see, all of the connections are back here. Starting on the left-hand side are all of the input connections. There are 3 sets of left and right. You can do XLR or TRS balance connections with these particular connectors right here. In the center are the speaker outputs that you can spin and get your speakers connected the way you need to. And again, you can do stereo here for left and right, or you can go mono, because these can be used as this can be used as a mono block, and just using those connections up front along with the switch that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Then over here is the main power connection that connects to the power adapter. Now this power adapter is pretty large. This AC to DC power adapter is a pretty large power brick, and I just kind of want to mention, to me, this is one of the downsides, is it does require this large brick, but otherwise I think it's pretty cool. Below that is a 12-volt trigger input. So if you have a processor with a trigger output, you can trigger this to come on with your processor. And they do include a connector in the box as well. So I like that. So that's something to think about if you have a processor. And then below that, you have several switches. Over here is the gain switch. You can go with a low gain or a high gain. It's basically a 2-step switch. And then in the middle is the stereo to mono selector here. Again, as you can see, is selected on stereo because that's the way I used it, but you can go mono. And then next to that is the volume or bypass switch. Now, this switch is basically on and off for the volume knob on the front of the chassis. When you're in volume mode like it is right now, the volume knob on the front of the chassis works. But if you put it in bypass mode, the knob does not work. And again, you will need a processor that has volume preamp capability to change the volume on the amplifier. So if something goes wrong with that and your volume knob doesn't work, just make sure you're not in bypass mode. And then next to that is a little firmware updating USB-C port.
Like 2 magnets, we are drawn to each other. You just know how to push all my buttons. Moved out of town and I erased your number. Like 2 magnets, we are drawn to each other. You just know how to push all my buttons. Moved out of town and I erased your number.
hopefully you enjoyed those audio samples and heard just how the LA90 Discrete compares to another amplifier, that being the Cambridge Audio AXA25. I reviewed that just a couple of weeks ago, and I'll put a link in the description below so you can check out that video review. But hopefully you could hear the differences. Now, in this room, I can say the first and last thing that I have noticed about the LA90 Discrete is just how clean and how detailed all the songs sound. Regardless of the song that I played, regardless of the speakers that I used, everything sounds clean and detailed. I tried it with these KEF Q150s, which you just heard. Also my Rendell Sound 1723 Monitor S speakers, which are 4-ohm speakers, didn't break a sweat. And the Q Acoustics Concept 30s. I've got a pair of those in, tried it as well. It works fantastic, okay? As far as heat's concerned, while we're talking about 4-ohms, doesn't have any issues with 4-ohm speakers because it's got plenty of ventilation on the side. It's also got ventilation in the back. Down here on the bottom, it's got rubber feet so it doesn't slide off the table. So from a ventilation standpoint, this works. But getting back to sound quality, like I said, it's clean, it's clear, it's detailed. One of the tracks that I tried was Feeling Good by Nina Simone. It's the song Birds Flying High, You Know How I Feel by Nina Simone. And I was listening to it on the Cruella de Vil soundtrack. And on that particular soundtrack, that song, when she's singing a cappella in the beginning, it sounds like it's a recording from a record because there's some pops and some hisses going on. This amplifier played those pops and hisses with great detail. I was actually impressed. I was like, man, I hadn't really heard those as well until I listened to them on this amplifier. You can hear them with other things, but they are really noticed with this amplifier. And that's why I said it's clean, it's clear, it's detailed. Now, as far as how it sounds, I would say that this is not exactly neutral. I would say it's just a touch, just a hair bright, okay? Not neutral, but just a hair bright, but not so much that I found it to be fatiguing or annoying or anything like that. Again, regardless of the speakers, regardless of the song. I just noticed that there was a lot of detail in the high end, a lot of detail in that treble regime, and even in the higher end of the mid-range, there was a lot of detail there. When you move into the mid-range and when you move into voices, you got a chance to hear those with that audio sample. Voices sound nice and natural. No pitchiness or anything like that. Voices are nice and natural. And then with the bass, I have to say, again, you get nice, tight, detailed bass when using this amplifier. It plays what is there. As far as the soundstage is concerned, things are placed left and right when they're supposed to be placed. Far left, far right plays there. Height is also there. And it actually has depth to the image. But that is one thing that I wish it had a little bit more of. I wish it gave just a little bit more to some of the sonic images when listening to, let's say, a live orchestra or something like that. And you know, instruments are placed in different places. I wish it was just a little bit more depth. It's not flat, okay, but I just wish there was a little bit more depth to the image. But overall, I think this is a really nice amplifier, and I don't really have any issues recommending it. If you are looking for an amplifier that is nice and detailed and clean, I don't think you're gonna find one much better than this, especially at this particular price range. And the cool thing is you can run this as a monoblock or as a stereo amplifier like I did. It can connect to pretty much anything. But I will recommend that you go with a processor that has preamp capability so you can control the volume and even a trigger function so that it can automatically turn this on without having to push the button up front. But otherwise, this is a really nice amplifier. So if you want to purchase this or anything else, use those links in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you next time.